All right, Proffitt Podcast listeners, I have not one, but two special guests here with me today. I have Carrie Saunders and Melissa Kitchens, and I cannot wait to share this incredible friendship and journey and all things podcasting. Welcome to the show, Carrie and Melissa. And I know it gets a little awkward when you have three people on a call. So welcome to the show. Let's just say that. Let's welcome. So happy that you're here.
Thank you, Crystal.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah. So quickly, can y'all each introduce yourselves just real fast? That way everyone can get used to your voice. That's the awkward part. It's like, wait, who's talking? Who's that? And then everybody knows I'm loud and obnoxious. So that's fine. Why don't you go first, Melissa?
Okay. That's funny. That's part of the awkward part.
Exactly.
My name's Melissa Kitchen, and I have been following Crystal in the hopes of setting up my podcast for several years now, and recently have been launching what has turned into my passion project, helping people to preserve their past through powerful personal stories. So basically, I work with people with my experience of being a counselor, a coach, a teacher, and I help them to write strong stories that they can pass along to the next generation. And so that's where my podcast has focused and what brought me back to Crystal.
Yeah. And what's the name of your show?
The name of the show is the Preserve Your Past podcast.
Awesome. What about you, Carrie?
So I'm a little bit newer to Crystal. I think I found her maybe 5 or 6 months ago, and I took her course on podcasting, and it was the thing I needed because it gave me step by step. I loved it. And so I have been doing e-commerce customization since 2002 with my main business, BCS Engineering, and we just love doing the hard stuff behind the scenes. And I have since then, via Crystal's help and Melissa, have created the E-commerce Made Easy podcast, where I teach entrepreneurs and web admins how to be successful in their e-commerce business.
Awesome. Okay. So before we go any further, can you each say when your podcast launched? Because I'm sure people are like, oh, they've had their podcast for several months. Like, how long has it been since you launched your podcast?
We both actually, and this was part of the sweetness of finding each other. We both launched the first week of May.
Okay.
I believe it was like right around May 2nd. I know we had some dates, and then yeah.
Yeah. Mine launched May 2nd. And then we were both the same week.
Yeah.
So May 2023. Okay. So I want to start there because, when we're recording this, it's the beginning of June. We're not 6 months into this journey. And so this is kind of where I want to start. So you both said, that you had taken my course and y'all had kind of been in my world, but I'm curious because you don't have similar topics. It's not like y'all have, we both have business marketing podcast and we just said, hey, let's be friends and let's hang out. Y'all have very different and very, I would say, super niche topics for what you talk about. So can you share a little bit about your journey, about where you met and what that kind of looked like? I'm going to open the floor up to whichever one of y'all.
Share my remembrance and perspective. And it's funny because as we're preparing for this, I'm like, I love that our topics are so different. I kind of feel like we're like peanut butter and jelly. I love her topics because it helps me with building my business. And I do have experience in working in building previous e-commerce type businesses, but she definitely has that different piece. But what I remember is I knew that this was, I was coming back to it with a very much a time. I was very strongly back into it with getting this done correctly this time and going back to your course and redoing it, but knowing that I wanted that accountability also again. And that was kind of actually a theme throughout my business, was finding my business besties, because I felt like I had been doing it as a hobby. My real people in real life don't we talk about that a lot. Don't get the podcasting. I had been in several groups outside of the Facebook group for Proffitt Podcasting and developed a few persons along the way. But I think what made it really cool was when I remember when Carrie declared her date. And I was like, that was my foggy date. But yes, I'm in with you. And that was like the opening to then realizing, and I'll let her speak to it, but I'm realizing we really clicked in so many different ways. We clicked in our energy at the time and our detail orientedness, but also our flexibility and supporting each other of like just having that person there when we were kind of going through it. But I'll let Carrie share what she remembers, because we did just start chatting in your chat.
Yeah, we were in your free Proffitt podcast online group, and yeah, she was right. I declared the date was May 2nd. That actually is kind of a significant date for our business. It was the first time we got an online sale in our business was on May 2nd. So I was like, why not? Let's have the anniversary of that be when I launched the podcast, and why not? And so when I said that was going to be my date, and Melissa's like, oh, I want to launch in May too. Maybe we can help each other. I was like, yes. I felt like that was just like a calling that I was supposed to meet and be with Melissa, and we were supposed to help each other out. And like she said, we do have different like perspectives, but kind of similar to Melissa. I also don't have my mother or father anymore. I was a bit older than she was when she lost hers, and that's her story behind her podcast. And we both have boy children too. So we've kind of connected on several personal ways, as well as, just helping each other out business wise.
Yeah. To kind of even piggyback on that, it's been really funny to watch. My kids, I think are a bit like, I think you have an older one too, but my boys are now 23 and 26, but they were both into band and parades and jazz band, shows all over. And I was the mom that was, out, and I'll watch Carrie's updates of like, here we are doing this and here we are doing that. And so it really, even seeing the boys sometimes is like, oh my gosh, it's so funny. Just some of those parallels we had no idea. And really only came to play to like enriching it to feel more personal and not just about the podcast pieces. Right. So it's been kind of fun.
Yeah. And I think that, I recently came back from a networking event, and that's one of the things that we talked about is, it can be awkward to make friends online. Well, first of all, can you tell everybody where you're located? Melissa, where are you
I am in southeastern Massachusetts, down
and what about
near
you,
New
Carrie?
Bedford and Cape Cod.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm in southeastern Ohio.
Okay. So I just want to set the scene, because I have people that I have had very deep, meaningful, and intentional online relationships with that I've either never met in person, or I have only met them like one time, and it was like brief, fleeting moments. And so for anybody that's listening, that's like, oh, well, I don't have someone that like Carrie and Melissa weren't like, hey, let's go to a coffee shop and like think this out. Like you had to be super intentional. And actually, I want to go back to this because y'all were both saying right before we started recorded that y'all are in a season, like y'all are really busy right now with your lives. So how were you able to set calls up? Because we've all had this, right? Where we're like, oh, we should, hop on a Zoom chat and talk, but then it never pans out. Or, you're doing Facebook messages back and forth, and then you don't answer somebody for like a day, and you're like, oh, I hope they don't take that personal. I just got super busy. So how did you navigate that as you were trying to figure out your podcast, or really just developing this new relationship that you had?
We were just really lucky, right, Carrie? Like we were both in the same wavelength. Neither of us, we literally have been doing it through Facebook Messenger. Today we did some voice messages. That was really nice. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love this, because nobody has to be making another appointment. And that's really worked for us is we'll hop into into Messenger, type up or say what we need to say, and then kind of leave it till the person can see it. And then sometimes we're like back and forth for a long time. But mostly it's just been through Messenger.
Yeah. And I think what we did early on too is we we worked on setting deadlines for each other. So we're
Mhm.
like, by this date, we're both going to have our elevator pitch or our trailer like typed out and reviewed. And then we would type it to each other and give each other feedback and things like that. So yeah, it was all asynchronous via Messenger, really. There was no, we never did meet on Zoom. And today is the first time we've heard each other's voices except for on our podcast.
Yeah. So that's another funny piece, because just like Crystal, when I had first talked to you, I was like, I feel like I know you.
Yeah.
I feel like Carrie, I listen to every one of Carrie's podcasts when I'm driving around. And so I know her voice. I've seen like the picture, right? And I've seen her on Messenger. So yeah, you feel like you do know the person. I think that actually helps. So thinking about like online relationships, this is nice because both of us, even though we have different topics, are very good at adding a bit of story, a bit of personal part to it. And so I can hear in her podcast, her voice come through. And then when I'm reading the Messenger, it's like I can hear it in her voice.
Yeah. Oh, this is so good. And I love that, like you were saying, like that intentional connection. And then it's like you become a fan of them because you want to see them succeed. Like, because you both, like, you're both in the trenches, you both know what you're going through, and you may be the only people that know exactly what you're going through. And I think that that's really why I wanted to have y'all on the podcast to talk about this, because it's so important, because I know there's somebody listening right now that has been wanting to start a podcast and they're just like, nobody gets it. Like my spouse doesn't get it. My mom doesn't get it. My kids don't get it. And I really want to do this thing, but it's hard or it's awkward. Like, I mean, do y'all have any specific examples where y'all had to be like, okay, we got this. Like we had to be each other's cheerleader. Like, was there any really difficult piece of the process that you can look back on now?
For me, it was overwhelm in the beginning, because I felt like I had learned the what to do's. And for me, I was really passionate about getting past I needed that accountability because I wasn't good at keeping the promise to myself. And it just felt so overwhelming that I'm a perfectionist. I just felt like that piece of the understanding of the accountability was really helpful for me. That was a challenging part. If I didn't have, and there was even like, Carrie mentioned, like we set our dates, but then it would be like, I can't, like this didn't get done today. But like we had the same thoughts of that's okay, keep it going. She would be, her time would be, I feel like we took turns of when we were in that season, but also things that we were really comfortable doing and other things that the other person was more comfortable doing, even with tools or things like that. That helps a lot. So I don't know if I kind of overwent of the question, but for me, that was an important piece of it. It seems like a very obvious one, but having a person that can help me not feel the overwhelm, whether it's from the accountability or from talking through the process and the tools, that was helpful.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add, Carrie? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, for me, my husband was really supportive and stuff like that, but my kids are like, huh? What are you doing, Mom? Like, what are you doing now? Like, seriously? But no, they're supportive, but they were still also puzzled. They're 21, almost 20 and 16. And so it was just great whenever I did get stuck and get too much in my head that Melissa could pull me out of it. And I felt like I did the same for her, because there were sometimes when I was on the jazz and she was like kind of falling behind, and other times I was falling behind and she was on the jazz, and we would just pick each other up and be like, that's okay. Let's just keep going. Let's just keep walking down this road together, and we've got this, right?
And celebrating was so much fun because even that happened a little different timing, right? And different milestones. But it felt like I felt like I was winning when she was winning. Like when we would do those little wins, we were like, woohoo! Like it really felt truly real and exactly what you would want in a friendship or a partnership like that too.
Well, I want to talk about that. I'm so glad you talked about celebrating, because I think that this is something that people often overlook in the beginning of their journey, because we're so wrapped up in, I just got to launch. I just got to get this thing out there. And as soon as I do, it's like, my job is done. And we all know that it's just beginning. Like, it feels like this big ramp up to get it out into the world. And then you're like, okay, like I can breathe like next year whenever I've got this thing, got my processes. But since you both recently launched and you have both seen some really cool milestones, like, is there anything that y'all want to celebrate and share? Because I've seen these like in our Facebook group. I love that y'all are sharers and you like say, oh, this happened. But is there anything specifically that you just want to own right now and say, yeah, I did this really incredible thing. I put my message out into the world, and now what happened after that?
Do you want to go first, Carrie? Because you did have a recent milestone that was pretty darn cool.
I did. And I was still like pulling my jaw off the floor because yesterday I got a Good Pods account just to kind of claim my podcast in there, even though it was already in there. And I go to click on my profile, and it shows me in the leaderboard, and I had 6 episodes at the time. I'm number 8 all-time SEO in the SEO category, number 8. Everybody around me, I know, it's so excited. Everybody around me has hundreds of episodes, and the number 1 person has thousands of episodes, and some of them have been around for over 10 years. And I'm like, I don't know how I did it, but I did.
I know how she did it. I listened to all her episodes. I feel like it's super clear. No, but you are super clear in your messaging. You're super clear on your episodes. And I think that your experience with SEO like comes out in everything you create without you even realizing it. So it turned into like you being the perfect like example of your own teaching too.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I'm always thinking of that in my head. And honestly, I've not even done a specific SEO episode yet. Like I just, it's in the list, but I just haven't done it yet. It's not there yet. Yeah.
That's incredible. What about you, Melissa?
It's funny. I was checking, and anyone who does this, I know you've talked about this too. I was checking my stats. I have no idea what my stats are today because that's how busy it's been in the last week or so. But one of my big wins, aside from reaching that first like 100 downloads or whatever that I was making sure I was counting, I was making sure people are seeing it. Like Carrie, I had a really hard time sharing I was even doing it and really owning it with the people I knew. And this time around, that really helped me that I was going to be more brave about sharing, and I was going to take this more seriously as a business and as a professional venture. So little milestones was when my sister-in-law said, oh my gosh, I listened to your podcast and I loved it so much. And I love how you introduced these stories in. And then she said, and you even teased the story, and I can't wait for that episode. So for me, it's like, I want to see the world out there listening, but my family, I had been like not even owning it with. So for them to then, for me to get brave to say, this is what I'm doing. I'm doing a podcast, which they all know I like to talk. So it wasn't surprising in that case. But then to hear feedback from family as they trickle in and start listening was really big. The other piece that I first thought of was going out and sharing it at the first conference I did. And you and I, Crystal, had talked about that was super powerful. I brought the QR code for downloading, for sharing it from the website, and got a ton more listeners just from sharing it as people were walking by to be able to look at it. So that was another one that felt like I was stepping out of kind of doing it from a room in the back of my house.
That's so incredible. And I just want to celebrate both of you. So, we kind of talked about, you've taken, the course like Proffitt Podcasting, but we also did some one-on-one coaching with both of you individually. And I am thinking back to, those very first times that I saw your faces individually popping up on the Zoom screen and how far you've come. And it hasn't been that long. Like, this is what I think is incredible. And I think it really comes back to, we've talked about y'all both have super niche topics, but I also think that it's important to mention that you are very clear on what you are doing. And I think that this is often lost on people because we can all niche down to something that's very obscure and, a little, like, okay, no one else is doing this one thing, so I'm going to do it. But you both have like found this super niche market where you can serve people and you can serve people really well. And I just want to take this opportunity to say I'm so proud of both of you. Like y'all are freaking crushing it. And I think it's so cool. Like I love being the cheerleader on the sidelines. It's like, let's go, Carrie. Let's go, Melissa. Like y'all are doing such an incredible job. So I wanted to say that. I had to get that out there. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about, okay, so if somebody's listening right now and they're nervous to reach out. So let's say they're not in a group, which, if you're not in our Facebook group, y'all absolutely need to come join. Carrie and Melissa are in there hanging out. Like, we can all chat and talk to each other. But let's say somebody listening doesn't really have access to a community, but they've seen someone that they follow online, or, maybe they have seen someone in the Facebook group chatting, but they've been the wallflower. That's like, I don't think I'm going to say anything. Like I'm nervous. Do you have any tips for someone that's right on the edge of reaching out to someone that they think would be a great person to help them, guide them through this journey? I mean, do you have any tips for them?
I think, first of all, knowing that not every relationship you initiate is going to turn into something. So there's been several people in different groups on different topics that as I was getting more focused on what I was doing, I've reached out to even possible podcast guests because their topics were what I thought would work through. Were not necessarily people that had the time or were in the right space to do it. So knowing that you can ask, it might not come to anything, but that doesn't mean that there's not the person for you. That might be the person. But Carrie, I'll let you kind of piggyback on that if you have a thought too.
Yeah, I mean, I would say kind of along those lines that, if you do reach out and they're not the right person or the right fit, don't feel like it's you. It's just the match. It's not necessarily a good match. So, and I think honestly, I'm an introverted extrovert. So like I can go sit in the corner all by myself for hours and be perfectly happy. But at the same time, I know I need to like put myself out there and be with other people. And I enjoy it, especially when I get to know somebody. So, and I can talk your ear off as soon as I know you. But really just being brave and just going with your gut, because that's kind of like what I did with Melissa. She commented and she's like, hey, maybe we should like help each other out. And my gut said, yes, let's do this. And so really go with your gut. I mean, your gut tells you a lot.
My gut told me, yeah. And my gut was why I reached out, because I am not always the person in the Facebook groups that's like making all the buddies or doing all the things. And sometimes I'm the wallflower because I'm trying to just keep up with everything on the outside. There was something in the language that Carrie was using. There was something in the timing that I could see that she was in and her energy that was similar to mine. And so it was about taking a risk and not minding like, hey, it's kind of like the lunch table. Can I sit here?
Yes.
Will you be my friend? But it wasn't even that formal yet. It was kind of like, hey, I thought maybe even like, let's just name the date right now.
Yeah.
And then we both did kind of, again, like took that risk of like taking it a little bit further of like, let's do it together. And there are people that want to do that. And there's good people in your group that are at different steps of the way that would love to do that. So I'm certain that there's other people that are going to be looking for their people. And maybe it does come down to like, hey, this is my timeline. Anyone else want to share that with me? And I know that's a challenge in itself when someone names a date and you're like, I've been putting this off too long. I've had my gray areas, like just name it. Let's do it. So.
Yeah, this is so good. And I love this feedback because I'm sitting here thinking like y'all are challenging me. I'm like, I need to set up like a facilitate an accountability like thread or something in the group where people can, like Melissa and Carrie, be like, hey, like I need help. And I think that it goes above and beyond just launching. And that's actually like the next thing that I was going to ask is, okay, you both launched your podcast. Like you did this huge, like you overcome this big obstacle, you've hit this big milestone. And as you both look forward, like no pressure, like I'm sure y'all don't have a strategic roadmap of what you're going to do for your podcast, but are you looking at like different ways that you can support each other? Because I know I could think of two women that I've had that have been so intentional in my life in sharing their ups, their downs, their wins, their losses, like terrible mistakes, lessons learned. And it's formed this beautiful relationship because it's real. It is based in this realness of being a business owner and just sharing with someone who gets it. I think that that's what makes these types of relationships so special. So is there anything that you're both looking forward to in your podcast journey that you're like, I'll probably reach out to her for that, or maybe we'll brainstorm on that in the future?
For me right now, I love having our relationship for the momentum to keep it forward. Because like you said, the launch is one thing, getting a many done in a batching part and being ahead. And then there's a point where like batching's great, but sometimes you're not there. And that's kind of where I'm at now. But Carrie and I have used this word, like giving ourselves grace when it doesn't look like what you want, but still moving forward, right? Like still getting something done, still putting something up. So for me, part of what I know I will utilize this for is for that part of continued momentum. And I think we still are able to get in that chat for wherever we are at. So I think that will still continue to open up as we move forward, just the same way as her to be able to come on yesterday into our chat and be like, oh my gosh, I just did this, claimed my podcast. And so then I was like, I didn't even think about that. Where is this thing? Like,
yes.
Because there's only so much you can like figure out. But yeah, strategically, I want to grow. I want to reach more people. I want to speak more. And so having this relationship for whatever pops up, to talk things through and to not give up on it when you get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've recently done that actually with Melissa, because like I had a really exhausting week, and Sunday came along. I hadn't had my podcast recorded yet, and they launch on Tuesday, and I need them done so that one of my helpers can help me polish it and finish it as far as like putting up the words and the descriptions and all those things. And I just reached out to her and I was like, I am just so exhausted. I said, I'm going to do this recording anyway. I don't have the energy for it, but I did it. And she was kind of in a similar place. So I just love that we can just be like, oh my gosh, here's where I am. I'm either on it or like I'm not. And I just, it's just great to share so that we can help us with that momentum. Like Melissa said, and I even realized like there was one week I was like, oh, I haven't checked in with Melissa for like, I don't know, it was like 10 days. I was like, oh my gosh, I got to check in with her. So then, I checked in with her and she was super busy too, but then we really reconnected again to see where each other was and helped us keep moving forward. So
I love the dynamic of your relationship because it sounds like it's very casual and informal. And I think a lot of people, when they think of accountability partner, they're thinking of those, oh, I got a scheduled reoccurring Zoom meeting and I have to show up and I got to be on time and I have to have a smile on my face and like have it all together and be prepared and have my last thing. Like it doesn't have to be that way. And that's really why I wanted you to come on and share your honest journey, because so many people can learn from that. And if somebody's listening and they're like, they've had this vision, because I remember when I was first starting as an online entrepreneur, I would hear about masterminds and peer groups and all these things. And I was like, I don't have $50,000 to throw down like for a mastermind. Are you kidding me? And so I remember thinking like, I'm going to have to just do this on my own and talk to my husband about it, or my mom, who has no idea they're like, I don't even know what that means. Who is Amy Porterfield? And I'm like, wait, hang on, excuse me. Like, she's the celebrity. What are you talking about? So it's so nice that you have this open and honest relationship where you don't have to, quote, have it all together and have everything be polished and perfect. You can share the messiness of the journey, because I think that that's where you're really going to learn from each other. Mm-hmm. And like you said earlier, Melissa, you're like, I didn't even know the Good Pods charts. Like, where is that? Like, so I hope that this encourages you and anybody that's out there, like, just let it be easy and like evolve into whatever it's going to be. And I'm so grateful that you two found each other, and that you just, it makes me so happy. Like I feel like I'm a proud mom. I'm like, I got my kids together on this play date, and now they're friends, and they're going to, ride off into the sunset and have an amazing podcast journey.
We feel the same way, I think.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I wanted to say, like, thinking of it as you were talking, we have a shared language. We have a shared structure. And so what I see for the future too is to like dig back into your new training and your new classes to see, like, what did I miss? What could we share for next step pieces? Because I think as things kind of come around, we'll both be tweaking, or we'll both be getting to that point where we're like, thinking of other ways to grow or share. Right. And there's so much still that I would like to get back to and think about as far as strategy. And I can see us doing that together, and it feeling better than trying to do it all in your head by yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and I would agree. And I really love the fact that we just have such different perspectives, because I can help Melissa with any technical stuff she might get stuck with, even though she's a pretty good technical person to begin with. And she can help me with like the stories and just the wording and things like that. And we really just, we kind of complement each other and have some commonalities like we've talked about. And yeah, I agree that I really want to go back through your course, but I got to get my course launched and then learn more about some of the new things that you've got in there. And I'm sure we'll keep each other accountable on those things.
Yeah. And I think it's really awesome to have someone, whether it's proofreading or listening to something that, like, again, it doesn't have to be necessarily, I mean, you just both happen to be interested in each other's topics, which I think is fantastic. But if somebody's listening, you don't have to have someone that's going to be your ideal listener or someone in your target audience. You could just have someone that's going to give you an honest opinion and say, hey, this was confusing in this episode. Can you explain that? And then ask the question, do you need to explain that to your audience? Like, I don't know. I'm not your ideal listener. Like, I have to tell people this all the time. And so I think that it's lovely that you have just this, I mean, we've said it so many times, this complementary effect between your two personalities and what you're doing, but it doesn't have to be the exact same thing. And so I guess I have a random question. I mean, it's probably going to catch you both off guard and be like, wait, what? Will y'all have each other on each other's podcast, or have y'all already?
Oh, I would love
to.
Have
you talked about it?
We haven't talked about it yet.
No, we haven't.
Getting that's one of my goals. Actually, that's what I'm going to say, Carrie. That's going to be one of our projects, is like lining up. I'm kind of stuck. That part is like my next growth step. And we've talked about that, Crystal, is me creating what I think is my process for doing that. But no, especially with Carrie's experiences, I think it would be really cool to talk about on the podcast, and for so many different pieces of the story part, whether it be as the, for her parents, but also the boys.
I think it would be super cool and super fun. And I would feel comfortable talking to her on my podcast, because I feel like we've known each other for years.
Yeah. So
it's only
funny. Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt. Can you tell me?
It's been just a few months, and I feel like it's been years. And no, I would totally love to be on her podcast, and I'd totally love to have her on mine. And it could be just a great Q&A as to what you need to know and what you need to learn. And yeah, I think it'd be fun.
The other thing that keeps coming up, Crystal and Carrie, is trust. Like, I feel like from the beginning, when you were talking, Carrie, about Crystal, about us sending things back and forth. And we had mentioned we had been doing that. I think in the beginning, you get inklings of whether you're going to be, are you getting the feedback that feels comfortable to you and what you're looking for? Because sometimes you have people that you develop relationships for and they give you feedback and you're like, hey, no, that's not really helpful information. And now I feel worse, or like sometimes it's just not a fit that way. But we, from the beginning, were sending each other our descriptions, because that's a very big part of the getting ready, getting everything up, was just getting those bios and things. We were even doing it the other day, getting ready to send you our info, was, reading through things again. Does it sound like what I mean it to sound like? Am I using the right pronouns? Like Carrie and I had talked about the I and the you and the we, and should it be me, or like so. But trusting the person, you grow that in the beginning, and then by the time you're willing to kind of trust in that, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And for anybody that's listening, I mean, I'm thinking about, if you do have a show where you're going to have guests on, I highly encourage you start with your friends. Like, start with your friends, because it is something that I did in the beginning, and it was just out of sheer panic. I was like, I don't want to just ask this total stranger to be on my podcast. So what did I do? If you go back to episode 1, which I always tell people to do that, and it makes me cringe so bad. I really don't want you to go listen to it. Like, don't come tell me about it. I go listen to it, but don't tell me about it. But that was one of my oldest friends. Like, I have known this person since I was 16. And so when I reached out to her to do this interview, and she was like, oh, of course. Yes, that sounds incredible. That was an ego boost. I was like, okay, my confidence was like slowly rising. I still didn't know what I was doing, but I was like, okay, but it makes me feel comfortable that I'm doing it with someone, to your point, Melissa, that I can trust, that I know she's not going to be like, oh, well, Crystal has no idea what she's doing, so I'm just going to drop off this call. And I think that could be a built-in benefit of having an accountability partner, where you can say, hey, we're doing this thing together, and do you want to be on my podcast? Like, do you want to be my first interview, or do you just want to practice? It doesn't have to be something that you both publish. Like, you could spend a little bit of time practicing together. And I think that is incredible too.
That's a great idea. No, I think the other piece of that, when you were talking about it also, is I know from listening to Carrie that she knows how to speak on a podcast. And I know you've talked about that, being thoughtful when people are like, hey, I want to be on your podcast and I'm going to promote this or that. And they get on and they're like, yep, nope. Or they just freak out altogether. So that's very thoughtful too, to know that I know her style. It would be really comfortable. We do need to plan this, Carrie. We have next steps, homework from this.
I was going to say, it's exactly what I was going to say. Y'all have your homework assignment. We'll have to check back in.
The funny thing is, my husband wants to be a guest on my podcast. He's already got 2 episodes in his brain as to what he wants to talk about too. So I'm like, so it cracks me up.
That's so incredible. And I love that, y'all both, it sounds like it's like a family affair for both of y'all, telling your kids, telling your family, your sister-in-law. I think that is also playing into the dynamic of your relationship. And it just feels like it's this organic thing. And I just really want to encourage anybody that's listening that it can happen. You can find your people. And I think it's just a matter of, here's a great question I want to throw out to both of you. Because I know you've both been in online spaces and online groups for a while. Have you kind of had this feeling in your gut, in your intuition, where you're like, I really want to find somebody? Or did you just really happen upon each other and you're like, oh, cool, this relationship will work? Or did you, either one of you have this, I really wish I had that friend? Because I know I did. I would see people have these relationships and I'm like, I kind of want that. Did either one of you have that?
I did, totally. But I also knew that I had to find the right person. So on some of the online spaces, sometimes the groups I was in were really quick and fast moving groups, and people were in for more quick in and outs, and really, I don't know, it didn't quite feel like an authentic space or an authentic relationship when you're chatting with people, right? And some people are just on and then they're never back talking to you again. Like you can be in one group and then when that launch or when that out is over, it's like everyone kind of dissipates and disappears. But I knew that's what I was looking for, was someone. I had no idea when Carrie and I like picked that date that would be what this turned into. I just figured we were going to help each other do our May 2nd date. And she and I would like be in your Facebook group. Sometimes we'd see each other and whatnot. But now I can't picture like moving forward without us like going through each step of the way. And it has turned into broader than just even the podcast, but now like thinking vision wise bigger. But how about you, Carrie? Have you?
For me, I didn't really intentionally set out to get a podcast buddy, but I do know that really helps me when I'm accountable. So when the opportunity presented itself and Melissa seemed like a great fit, I just jumped on it. I mean, I probably replied like within a minute. I was like, yes, let's do this. But yeah, no, I didn't really plan for it, but I do know that really helps you really just get things forward. If you have somebody there to support you and be there every step of the way through the good and the bad parts of it.
This is so awesome. Oh my gosh. I really hope that your story of your relationship and holding each other accountable, cheering each other on, sharing the messiness, all of it really encourages people listening today, because I just know I hear this all the time. So I know that it's a struggle that people have. And I just want to give you encouragement that you can find someone and just keep looking. And okay, like y'all are holding me. So my assignment for this episode is, I think that we should have like a monthly post in the group where it's like our accountability thread, like you're looking for your buddies, like this is it, like let's ping in there and, get some of these, different accountability pods going. That way we can get more messages out there and just give people more confidence, because at the end of the day, it sounds like that's one thing that you both really achieved with this relationship, is the confidence to just do it and put it out there and get it going. So again, I just appreciate you both so much. But we're going to transition into some rapid fire questions. I know y'all both listen to the show, so here we are. So the way that we're going to do this is I'm going to ask you all the question, and then Melissa, I'm going to have you go first, and then Carrie, I'm going to have you go second. Okay. So the first one is, what piece of advice would you give to a brand new podcaster?
I would say keep going, keep doing it. And even if you said you would do it every Thursday and you miss one, keep going. Like it's a long game. It's a marathon. So a new podcaster that already has a podcast, just keep going.
Yeah, I would agree along those lines, is just really, what is your next step that you need to do? Just think about that. Don't think about where you need to be in 6 months. Think about your short, where do you need to be this week? Especially in the beginning. You can think about your long game later, but in the beginning, you really just need to be thinking about what's next. What do I need to do next?
That's fantastic. This is so good. Okay. This next one, I'm going to break it down. Y'all know it's a two-parter. I'm going to break it down. Okay. So what is your dream podcast that you would love to be on? And Carrie, I'm going to get you to go first.
Okay. Dream podcast I'd love to be on. Well, I'm already on yours. So how about I say Amy Porterfield's Online Marketing Made Easy? That would be awesome if I were on that one.
What about you, Melissa?
I was thinking of this ahead of time. I would love a suggestion, because I listen to Amy Porterfield. I listen to you. I listen to ones that are more business based. I really like Mike Rowe's story ones.
Oh yeah.
It's not this is how I heard it. But that's not really a guesting one, but yeah, I love his podcasts. But I don't listen to a lot of story type podcasts. So I was like, oh gosh, what would I want to be on that I would be like, a good fit for? But I would say like, I really love that short-term story. You don't know what it's about. Kind of micro podcast. Those were fun. So that's one that I would love to, somehow be involved with. Maybe
awesome.
one of my stories, right, could be the story. I have no idea, but
oh, I love that. No, see, you're thinking.
he also
you're
involves his
strategizing.
parents and things, so he does a lot with that. I think that's why it kind of feels like it's one of my fun ones that I listen to for pleasure and not just for learning.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Okay. The second part of this is, who is your dream podcast guest? And Melissa, I'm going to throw it back to you. So who's your dream guest you would love to interview?
I've been thinking of authors because I feel like having a really good person who's done like a lot of biographical writing or memoir writing. I had someone in mind. Oh gosh, you picked me first and now I can't even think of who it is.
It's the pressure of the spotlight.
I had two people. So one of them that I know is talks a lot about, oh my gosh, it was like historical fiction. Well, one person that I think is really cool that I would love to talk to that goes along with storytelling and history is, he was the author. Now I got to Google his name. He was the author of The Mayflower. And he is based out of Nantucket. And so part of what I do is, now I'm going to look at it, is stories that have to do with like history and family. But yeah, I'll look up who the author was of that. But yeah, he would be really interesting to talk to. Honestly, it's very hard for me because a lot of my podcast, like I would love Maya Angelou, right, to be on my podcast. She has deceased. Yeah. I'd love to, probably one of my dream guests would probably be having my brother and sister on.
That's fun.
Eventually having that on, because one of the unique things I'd like to like explore in the podcast is how we have different memories of the same story. So I'll go with that, and that will simplify it. And you can edit out all of my.
This is great. No, it's great. It's great. What about you, Carrie? Who would be your dream podcast guest to interview?
Gosh, I find this one really hard because I don't know a whole lot of people in my genre, like in what I do. I do think that it would be really cool to have somebody on that could help my audience. So I think, I mean, even as simple, not really as simple, but even as, I don't know, a cop out as to saying you, Crystal, would be cool, just because I felt like one of the reasons I did the podcast is I felt like other businesses could benefit from doing their own podcast too. And so, even something like you or Amy Porterfield to really help them see a different perspective on marketing and how they can do things like that. I think that would be really cool, because I think it would really help my audiences, because I feel like a lot of them don't know. They know how to market in a small way. They don't know how to market in like a big way, in a big impact way.
Well, I would be honored to be on your show. Either one of you. Like, this is super, super fun. And I love the idea of the guest, like, Melissa, to your point, it doesn't have to be someone that's living or deceased. I just think that it's fun to dream about like who you could talk to. And I think that's what's so beautiful about podcasting is it gives you this opportunity to speak to some people that you may have not had access to, but like podcasting. I mean, y'all know I'm going to cheerlead podcast. Well, I'm just going to digress there because we have one last question, and I'm going to come to you first, Carrie. Do you consider yourself a perfectionist?
I am a recovering perfectionist. How about that? I'm still a perfectionist sometimes, and I try not to be, because I know perfect does not exist and it will hinder me from getting things done.
What about you?
And I'll use a different terminology, and I'll say that I am a messy perfectionist. No, I'll do it. I'll say it more a creative perfectionist. I am not near, like, I do get stopped by perfectionism. And I am recovered because I actually taught a class on Forget Perfect. Because it's something that, I was being stopped by, but no, I definitely have part of me that's like, okay, this is what it needs to be. I'm getting better at this is good enough, and representing myself well at the same time. because I think that's the hard part now when you're like, people are watching. I want to represent myself for who I am and the truth, but I also just want to get this up and out.
Yes, yes, yes. And I think like both of them, the messy perfectionist and the recovering perfectionist, there's a lot of them in this community. So, and y'all know this already because I don't even know where I fall anymore, but I feel like it's somewhere along the spectrum and everybody is welcome because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to share our message. And I think that y'all are doing a fantastic job. Can y'all tell everybody where they can find you and learn more about your podcasts? Either one.
So you
first.
Can find.
I'm like, this is when the awkwardness. If everybody's listening and we're all kind of like, who's gonna go first? Okay, you go first, Melissa.
You can find most of everything that I have to offer. So my tips and tools and my podcast are all housed at melissaankitchen.com. And that's Ann without an E. My first, middle, last name. And the podcast is the Preserve Your Past podcast, which you can find on BuzzSprouts and that website, www.thepreserveyourpastpodcast.com. And there are free tools on the website also for strategies and some mind maps and things to work through getting started with the stories.
Awesome.
And for me, you can find me in a couple different places. So our main business is bcsengineering.com, which just stands for Brandon Carey Saunders Engineering, which is my husband's Brandon. And then you can find my podcast at ecommercemadeeasypodcast.com. And I have some great nuggets and tools and SEO stuff for WordPress and e-commerce stuff on both websites.
Yeah. And we're going to link to everything in the description. And I'm going to link to the Facebook group too. Because everybody, if you're listening to this, come like Melissa, Carrie, and I, like we're all hanging out in there. And I think it's just, I feel like it's turned into a vibrant community in the last probably 6 to 8 months. Like I have to be really honest. It wasn't always like that. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it's finally what I wanted it to be as far as community and people not being promotional and spammy and turning into all those Facebook groups we all hate. And we're like, why am I getting notification for this? I want to leave this group. And so again, I'm so grateful that it was the thing that facilitated this relationship because I'm so stinking proud of y'all for launching your podcast, getting them out into the world and holding each other accountable and cheering each other along the way. So incredible. Thank you for sharing your story and being on the podcast today.
Well, thank you, Crystal, for creating that community and for being present in that Facebook group. That was a big piece that I think has built up all of us. So, and we couldn't have done it without you.
Yes. And I second that. I just feel like you've been just such a great cheerleader, Crystal, and then Melissa too. It's wonderful. I don't think I could have done it, at least definitely not on the timeline I set without the group and without Crystal's help and Melissa's help.
Yeah.
Oh, this is so incredible. Thank you all so much for being here today.
Thank you for having us.